Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. Chinese Vice President Han Zheng visited Saudi Arabia and Kuwait this week, part of a regional tour that will also bring him to Qatar for the Second World Summit for Social Development. In this episode, we'll hear from Al Monitor's Rosaline Carroll about what the trip tells us about China's growing influence and strategy in the region. Rosaline, who is currently authoring the Al Monitor China newsletter, offers insights into China's focus on Saudi AI ambitions, the challenges the People's Republic faces in seeking a free trade deal with the kingdom, why Kuwait was chosen as a destination on Han's visit, and what to look out for in Doha next week. Hope you enjoy. Rosaline, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Rosaline, where is China focusing its efforts in Saudi Arabia? Specifically, what sectors are they interested in, and what do you think Vice President Han wanted out of this trip?
So I think with Han's visit and in general, China is pushing into more than just oil in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. But in Saudi Arabia in particular, I think they're looking at AI, tech supply chains, and a lot of renewable and green energy projects. But also, Han's visit is part of the wider Saudi-China context, which is a two-way street. So Saudi Arabia wants transformation under its Vision 2030 goals, which entail big mega projects like we've seen and a lot of diversification, so away from just oil. They know that China can help with this, and China sees and has already taken the chance to tap into this. So I think on this visit, Han wants to position China as a partner beyond just an energy buyer. And I think that means more future-facing investment and embedding Chinese firms and financial institutions into Saudi Arabia's diversification model and into its future.
You wrote in this week's newsletter that Saudi Arabia is reluctant to do a free trade deal with Beijing, even though that's something the People's Republic is interested in. What does Saudi Arabia see as the downsides to such an agreement?
So talks have been going on for a while on a free trade agreement. But while a deal like that sounds appealing, it also comes with risk. I think the Saudis know that if you sign a broad deal like that with China, you could suddenly see a flood of low-cost Chinese goods into your market. So that's a concern for Saudi Arabia in particular because it has its own goals under Vision 2030 having to do with localizing manufacturing and upping its own domestic production. So I think Saudi Arabia is being cautious. Obviously, China represents a lot of opportunity, and still, China was Saudi Arabia's biggest trading partner in 2024. I believe bilateral trade topped 100 billion that year. So it's not as if trade isn't already happening without a free trade agreement. It's happening, and it's happening in a big way, obviously.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Rosaline Carroll after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Rosaline, why do you think Vice President Han also went to Kuwait? Why did he choose that Gulf state as a destination on this trip?
Well, Kuwait is an interesting stop. It's not a big headline maker, but it has been on the on the proverbial China train for years. I mean, it was one of the first Gulf countries to establish ties with China way back when, and it joined the Belt and Road Initiative in 2014. So it was an early partner. And China is already deeply involved in energy in Kuwait and in infrastructure development there, like the development projects around Mubarak Al Kabir port in Kuwait. And somewhat like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait has its own Vision 2035 plan, and it's also aiming for diversification away from just oil. It wants growth and, you know, global linkage. So for Kuwait, I think China is an obvious partner in achieving some of those goals.
Finally, what do you think we should look out for at the World Summit for Social Development in Doha next week, where Han will also be in attendance?
So next week's summit, I'm looking out for any actual deals or memoranda of understanding. I'm also keeping an eye out for bilateral meetings, who is getting whose attention, who is China prioritizing on the sidelines. Above all, though, I think that this is the type of event that I'd expect a lot of symbolism from. So asking myself, what is the narrative that China is presenting? Um, After all, this is a summit focused on social development, poverty eradication, inclusion, and so on. So this is more than just a technical or deals focused summit. We've seen China present a sort of alternative narrative to the one presented by the US and the West. You know, instead of the classic Western model, which is heavy on conditional aid and government reform prerequisites, China emphasizes quicker development, win-win partnerships, and respect for sovereignty, and, quote unquote, non-interference, which in itself is a debatable premise, but that could be for another podcast, perhaps. So I'll be looking at that, which I think is particularly important at a time when the US is sort of receding from international organizations and international aid. So I'm just keeping an eye on the sort of language and narrative that's presented there.
Rosaline, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your newsletters and reporting on these topics.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on these stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.